Hi there, welcome to the channel. If you're looking to take your English from the classroom out into the real world, then this could be the place for you. Every week, I'm going to talk about something for 2 or 3 minutes, but I'm going to talk as though I was talking to an audience of native speakers. So you're going to get an opportunity to really practice your listening skills. But then I'm going to slow things down and I'm going to take a look at some of the specific phrases that I've used. And then I'm going to dive into a couple of elements of the grammar. This week, the third conditional, and I'm going to talk briefly about gerund nouns. Now, the text of what I'm about to say is all in the description box below. So if there's any vocabulary you want to look up, it's all there. So if that sounds like a plan, let's get into it. I think my worst photo might have been taken about 15 years ago. My wife had received a call from her cousin in France saying that she'd rented a ski lodge for the week down in the Alps. She got a room free. Did we want to go along? Now, I'd never been skiing before, but I was kind of interested. And although I didn't harbour any illusions that I was going to turn myself into some kind of Olympic champion in 7 days, I thought I'd do okay. Well, had I seen just how steep that damn mountain was going to be, maybe I'd have stayed at home. So I think I might be the first person in recorded history to have been kicked off a beginner ski course simply for being crap. Now, I've got some excuses. The first is the mountain itself. It was basically a collection of red and black slopes, which are crazy difficult places to try and learn how to ski in the first place. Second was that in the mornings when the course was taking place, the mountain wasn't so much covered in nice powdery snow, but ice. It was very difficult to ski on. It's icy, said our French ski instructor all the time. And lastly, I was the only genuine beginner in this beginner's course. Everybody else had skied before, so I was struggling to keep up. And so I started falling, and I'd fall again. And after a few days, my body was basically just one big bruise from my feet up to my shoulders. And I think it might have been on the Thursday or the Friday when, as a group, we were just stood in the line listening to something that the instructor was telling us. When I fell over again, I wasn't even trying to go anywhere. And he said to me that maybe it was best for myself, best for the group, and perhaps best for his sanity that I quit the course. Now, meanwhile this had been going on, I'd noticed that there was a photographer working on the slopes. She'd follow the groups around, take photos and pin up the thumbnails in the clubhouse. And if you liked them, you could buy them for a few euros. This is back before everyone was carrying their own smartphones on the slopes. And I said to my wife, well, we should go and take a look at this photo. I mean, I might look okay. I knew it had been taken on a really, or just about the easiest part of the mountain. And so I thought for a brief moment, I might look like a normal skier. And she said, don't know about that. But anyway, we went down to the clubhouse and saw the photo. It wasn't so much embarrassing as mortifying. I looked like a giraffe on roller skates. Everywhere I had a limb, I had it somewhere where it shouldn't be. And that's when my wife changed her mind. She said, no, we should definitely buy this photo. But she said that's because she's cruel and she wants to punish me. But fortunately, I won the argument and we didn't get the photo because I didn't want this permanent reminder of my own ineptitude and the fact that, however briefly, I'd managed to convince myself that I might look okay on a pair of skis. I didn't harbour any illusions. I didn't harbour any illusions that I was going to become an Olympic champion. This phrase means that I didn't have any expectations that I was going to become an Olympic champion. It would obviously be simpler to say I didn't have any illusions. It would mean exactly the same. But we have this common collocation in English. I didn't harbour any illusions. Now, normally when you see the word harbour, it means the place where you moor boats overnight. But clearly in this phrase, it's being used as a verb. I didn't harbour any illusions. So we might say another phrase, for example, could be, when he first went to drama school, he didn't harbour any illusions that he was going to become a Hollywood star. He didn't have that level of expectation. It wasn't so much embarrassing as mortifying. When I saw the photo in my story, it wasn't so much embarrassing as mortifying. And what I'm really saying here is that there was nothing more embarrassing imaginable in the world. Now, mortifying and embarrassing are essentially synonyms, but mortifying means even more embarrassed than just embarrassed. And rather than simply saying, I was very, very embarrassed, we often use the two words together to amplify just how embarrassing a situation it was. So someone might say, the interview went so badly, it was beyond embarrassing, it was mortifying. I'd managed to convince myself that I might look okay in the photo. This means that I had deluded myself. I had deceived myself. So we might say, for example, he had managed to convince himself he was well, even though he could hardly stand. In my story, I used a version of the third conditional that's possibly a little bit more complicated than anything you'll have seen in a classroom environment before. What I said was this: had I seen just how steep the damn mountain was going to be, maybe I'd have stayed at home. We use the third conditional when we want to talk about two things in the past that didn't happen, but if one of them had happened, it would have had an effect on the other. So a very simple example would be this: if I had known that you were in town, I would have called you. So the construction, if I, the subject, had known, past perfect verb construction there, if I had known that you were in town, comma, I, the subject again, would have called, a participle, you. If I'd known that you were in town, I would have called you. Unfortunately, I didn't know that you were in town, so I didn't call you. Neither of those two things happened. Now, in my story, I could have used a slightly simplified form of the third conditional that would have been easier to understand. I could have said, for example, if I had seen that the mountain was so steep, I would have stayed at home. And then it would have been easier for a language learner to see those clues, the if, past perfect verb, then the comma, subject again, would have, participle, and so on. But in what I actually said, I did 4 things that would serve to make it a little bit richer, but also a little bit more confusing at the same time, particularly for a language learner. So I'm going to talk you through those things. The first one is that in the original phrase, I never used the word if. Rather than saying if I had seen, I simply said had I seen. Now these two phrases mean exactly the same thing, but obviously you didn't get to hear that trigger word if. I simply said had I seen just how steep, etc., etc. So a different form, a little bit snappier, so I can get into the phrase quicker, but means exactly the same as if I had seen. The second thing I did to complicate matters in the first clause was use a future in the past tense. So I said how steep the damn mountain was in the past going to be, future. Why did I do that? Well, because the whole story is in the past. I'm telling you about something that happened some time ago. But in this moment of the story, I'm yet to see the mountain. So from my perspective, it's in the future. So this means in that first clause, we've not only got a past perfect verb tense, we've also got a future in the past construction as well, which is obviously complicating matters. Then in the second clause, I haven't directly started with the subject, I in this case. I've said maybe. I've softened the clause. I'm not saying that definitely I would have stayed at home had I seen just how steep the mountain was. I'm saying maybe. And you can do this with the third conditional. You can soften it a little. And the other thing I've done is I've used that typical contraction in English. Rather than saying I would have stayed, I simply say I'd have stayed. And that's what most native speakers are going to do in this context. Now, most native speakers will use the third conditional all the time. but they won't know that they're actually using it, and neither will they even know that it's called the third conditional. And this leaves them mentally free to add all these little embellishments to it, which makes our language richer, but obviously makes it more difficult for learners to identify the core grammatical structure that they're using. And that's why I think this one has been quite a good example, because this is basically how you're going to hear the third conditional being used in the real world as opposed to the classroom. A gerund noun is a noun that has been created out of a verb. Let's take a look at these two sentences on the screen. I feel free when I am skiing. Nothing makes me feel so free as skiing. Their meaning isn't identical, the two sentences, but it's pretty similar. But what's most interesting is that although the word skiing appears in both sentences, its form is different. In the first sentence, the word skiing is being used as part of the continuous present tense, so it's being used as a verb. In the second sentence, nothing makes me feel so free as skiing, it has become a noun, or more specifically a gerund noun. Now, to see this distinction, let's take a look at another sentence. Skiing gives me the feeling of freedom. Here, skiing is most definitely the subject of our sentence and therefore a noun. And our verb is no longer skiing, but gives. Skiing gives me the feeling of freedom. Now, we use regularly quite a few gerund nouns in the English language, such as running, walking, diving, driving, flying, and we have a bunch of violent ones as well, such as hunting, shooting, fishing, and fighting. Now, learners of the language tend to make a couple of errors when trying to create nouns out of verbs in the English language. One tendency they have is simply to use the verb stem. So you might hear something like this: I like ski. Now, I'd understand what you meant, but that would be a grammatical error. The other error that I hear much of the time is I like the skiing. There's a temptation to use the definite article, but gerund nouns are uncountable, so they don't carry the article. They don't need to be used. Now, sometimes the addition or the use or the omission of the definite article in English only leads to a grammatical error, but sometimes it can change the meaning of what you're trying to say fundamentally. So I'll give you an example in relation to a good bit of English slang, the word bollocks. So if I was to say, skiing is the bollocks, I would be saying that skiing's fantastic. It's the best thing in the world. On the other hand, if I were to say skiing is bollocks, I'd be telling you that I really didn't like skiing. So if you want to add the word bollocks into your English vocabulary, you need to be very clear whether you want to say something is the bollocks or simply bollocks. Well, that's it for today. I hope you found this useful. If so, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button. I'm going to be uploading more videos every week, so if there's something you'd like me to talk about, let me know in the comments below. So until next time, take care.